Okay, things that we have going on. Well, I'm so glad you asked. On June 22nd, the penultimate Sunday in June, we're having a baby dedication Sunday, a commissioning Sunday. We've got new people getting on the board. Woo! Thank you, Lord. We have new people getting into elders. He isn't here, so we don't have to cheer for him. Boo. No. Yay. That's a joke. So that's on the 22nd. If you have babies that are being dedicated, you can invite people. No, you're not. That's also fine. The only thing to keep in mind is verse, and then tell me that verse and probably your child's whole name, and we'll be ready to rumble there. Okay, and then the week after that, we have the church camping trip, which I feel like everybody in this room has already heard plenty about and been nagged about, but just in case you haven't been here in a while, every year, last weekend of June, we go on a church camping trip. It's a great time. We provide dinners. We have the whole loop reserved. There's still room if your plans have changed, you want to jump in. It's bring your own breakfast and lunch, but again, big family dinner, and it's a big hangout time, good time. Hayburn? I don't know the area. Okay, great. Hayburn State Park, swimming, hanging out. It's great. There's that. And then after that, you should know, Refuge Church always takes a sabbatical every single July. So why is that? Why do we do that? It's a break for me, which I know nobody would have known otherwise, but I'm actually pregnant, you guys. Whoa. So that's happening in July, but then also it's a break for all of our volunteers and everybody who we are so thankful for and appreciate so much, who do music and lights and lyrics and all the things, set up and tear down, all that. It's a break for everybody. And there's lots of travel that happens then. So if you didn't know that, we will be away in July. You can still come up and stand on the sidewalk mournfully. You're welcome to do so, but we won't be here. Nobody will let you in. Sounds like not a great time to me. So don't come in July. Do come on the camping trip. Do come on our commissioning Sunday, our baby dedication Sunday, the week before that. And then George has some announcements about service opportunities, basically.
Yeah, so.
And Opie.
So I work with the International Programs Office at the University of Idaho. And I met with them this last month to talk about just the status of international students, how things are going, what ways could the community support students. And so I wanted to share some of the things that they sent over to me.
Because international students are having a really hard time in this particular political climate.
That was the next bullet point.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I'll let you do your job.
So if you haven't been paying attention, or if you haven't been following, a lot of international students are not traveling home over the summer because they don't want to be kept out of the country when it's time to come back for school, which means that they're sitting around in their dorms on campus and don't have a lot of things to engage in, and they're just kind of waiting it out so that they don't get deported and have their visas revoked. So the IPO is trying to engage them with a couple of events. They sent over 3 hiking trips that they want to take the students on, and they're looking for volunteers to help with the transportation side of things and to help. You know, you drive there, you go on the hike, you drive them back home, essentially is what that is. And there are 3 of those. They're doing Elk Creek on June 10th. They're doing Kamiak on the 18th, and they're doing Dvorak on the 31st.
That's how you pronounce it in Eastern European if you went to music school.
State Park. Dvorak.
Very good. Thank you.
Everybody says Dvorak. Excellent. Great.
Music
So those
students.
are 3 coming up. Those are event-focused service opportunities. There are 2 other ways that they are looking to support students over the summer, but also through the next year. These are ongoing programs. They have what's called Friendship invite them over to their house for dinner once
Yay.
a semester or once a month, depending on how much you want to eat. And that's just an opportunity to provide some family comfort, some community for students who otherwise just don't have any of that. The other opportunity is a Run English Conversation Partners program where you go and you meet with a student at a coffee shop or somewhere on campus, and you just spend an hour talking with them so they get to practice English. And I'm going to post all of that in the Slack with sign-up links that you can go to
Yay.
to engage with those if you want. So,
Thank you. Woo! We love making people not feel alone when they might have regretted coming to our country and sitting alone. Goodbye. Glad that announcement's on the live stream. Perfect. What are we doing here? Existentially, what are we doing here in the series? We have been talking about Jesus encountering people post-resurrection. We haven't been talking about Jesus' teachings. We haven't been talking about him turning over tables. We've been talking about him meeting with people somewhere in their spectrum between belief and doubt and how they encounter him in that space before ascension. Last week, we were talking about doubting Thomas, as he is so often called, and so many of us found a character to relate with in that story, in that he's somebody who says, no, I want more data, I want more evidence, and Jesus shows up and meets him where he's at and gives him that evidence. But we also talked about the pain, the tension, the discomfort for everybody else in that community who all experienced something together. And he was the one person being like, well, I don't believe any of you, or your experience isn't enough for me. And the tension that would have caused, and yet how they all remained in one big messy community anyway, and how Jesus came and met them in the middle of that. So if Jesus then did meet Thomas in the middle of that, and he said, here's the exact thing that you asked for. Stick your fingers in my wounds, you weirdo. He also, though, said, cease your faithlessness, right? So he both met him where he was at, and then he called him onto something else. He moved him forward. He invited him, challenged him to move forward. And we're going to see how potentially that happens in this story as well. I'm going to walk through it. It's our beach brunch story, pretty famous, John 21. You can find it in the Slack or in your regular Bible. Either is fine. I am going to walk us through it one interruption at a time. First verse. After these things, Jesus revealed himself again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. If you're confused, that is the Sea of Galilee. It's the same thing. Tiberias is just a black city built on the edge of it, perched on the edge of it. Now he revealed himself in this way. Shimon, Petros, and Thomas, who was called Didymus, and Nathanael from Cana in the Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. To us, we can be like, that's a bunch of random names. Cool. I love that so much. But it is cool because that part at the end is significant and interesting. There are 7 disciples together, and 2 of them are unnamed. 2 of them, thus possibly being from the larger group of disciples. So in all of the grief and confusion and excitement of the early church community post Jesus resurrection, it would have been so easy to be like, this is the moment to circle in the wagons, keep things tied off. We don't know what's going on. We don't know if the Sadducees are going to come after us or the Romans or whoever. And yet we see God's people not forming a little clique, but instead bringing in other people along with them. There's an invitation for us in that as well. So what does our guy Peter say? Shimon, Petros, said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we're also coming with you. They went out and got into the boat, and during the night they caught nothing. So Jesus hasn't been around a lot, right? Post-ascension, why? Why does he keep dipping out and disappearing? He's probably preparing them for what life post-ascension is, right? For us as Jesus followers today, we don't get to have a physical guy. We see where the back of his head is and then go follow him wherever he goes. Instead, the way that we experience Jesus are these encounters, right? God shows up in the particular space in a particular moment, and it's meaningful and directional and helpful. And then we don't necessarily carry that sense with us all the time. And so I think that Jesus is training his disciples for that coming reality by showing up and then disappearing, and then showing up and disappearing. And we keep seeing him in disguise, right? Both because that's normal in the ancient Near Eastern literature, but also because he's training them to see his presence in the face of strangers, right? And so we find Peter and the disciples in that kind of like, oh no, where did Jesus go? We don't really get it. And maybe it's the energy of just not wanting to sit there and twiddle your thumbs, or maybe there's something to the fact that this is where they first encountered Jesus. And so they're having this nostalgia trip of like, let's go fishing again. Maybe we'll catch a glimpse of what used to be perhaps a time, a season that they miss, right? So off they go, and the people come with him. Heck yes, let's go. Don't be alone. And that's beautiful too. So what happens? Now it was already early morning, and Jesus stood on the beach. However, the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, "Children, you do not have any fish to eat, do you?" They answered to him, "No." And he said to them, "Throw the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll be able to find some." So they threw it, and they were no longer able to haul it in from the large number of the fish. Let's not miss the comedy here, right? So they've been up all night trying to fish unsuccessfully, and then some random guy on shore is like, hey, you guys out there, children. It's always a good opener, always makes people feel really good. So you can just kind of imagining them, heavy sigh. He keeps going, "You've been out there for like a while, right? But you haven't caught anything." Still silence. "Am I right? Have you caught anything?" "No." And then this random person, who is Jesus, tells them something nonsensical, right? It's not really that helpful to put your net on the other side of the boat. It's only a few feet away. It's a lake. It's not like a big current difference or something. And yet, there's an invitation in there that's very fun, because Jesus, if he was trying to make a point of like, boom, it's me, he could have just filled that net with the 153 fish. Poof, right? He's God. He can do the miracle any way he wants. They could have just been fishing and then, whoa, look at all these fish. And then remember previous times he had done that and been like, oh, that guy over there, maybe he's Jesus. But instead, he sets up an opportunity for them that they get to choose whether to say yes to it or not. And what is that opportunity but to listen to the insight, even when it doesn't make sense, of somebody else in their community, right? Random guy on shore, maybe older if he's calling them children, and he tells them something that doesn't make sense. If I had been up all night and then some random person tried to give me advice on my profession, I'd probably be like, "Thanks, have a good one," and then like row the other way, just disappear into the reeds, right? That would be more comfortable for me than to say, yeah, maybe you could be onto something. But Jesus creates this opportunity. Are they going to listen to the voice of somebody else in their community? Are they going to say yes to the potential for a miracle to happen, because it doesn't make any sense? And they say yes to that experience. And they say yes to listening to this voice of the stranger, within whom might be the Spirit, right? And sometimes we're trained in our theology and our church upbringing to be like, God is sovereign. He's going to do what he wants, and he's going to do the right thing. And whether I show up for it or pay attention or do anything, that doesn't really matter, because he's sovereign, right? But continually in the story, we don't see God operating that way. He intentionally provides a door for them to choose whether they're going to step into it or not, because God cares about our free will and our partnership, and engaging with us in that way, not just him snapping his fingers and doing stuff. So they can't even haul the nets in. What happens then? It says, then that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." So Shimon Petros, when he heard that it was the Lord, tied around himself his outer garment, for he was naked, and threw himself into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net of fish, because they were not far from the land, but about 200 cubits away. So note the presence of different personalities and giftings here. We have John, who is able to recognize that that's Jesus out there, who's saying something, who's moving, who's inviting people to something. That's one gift. That's one personality. There's the gift that is Peter, who is just plunging into the ocean. And then there's not ocean, lake. And then there's everybody else's gift who is perfectly happy to do the work to haul in this extraordinary large thing, right? So it's not that they all have the exact same reaction, that they all like kneel and pray and say the same thing. It's not a one thing that is expected of everybody. Everyone's diversity is valuable on this team. But let's address the nudity in the room. What's going on with Peter? Great question. There's lots of arguments about just how naked he was, about how this is probably talking about he didn't have his tunic on, but he still had undergarments on, blah, 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 whatever. Either way, he does something that's weird, which is he puts on his coat before he gets in the water. If you've ever been swimming, that's not the best idea. Why would you put on a giant coat, his outer garment, right, specifically, not just his clothes, his coat, and then jump into the water? Let's think about it. So it's possible that Peter hasn't seen the risen Jesus at all since he betrayed him. Peter isn't listed in any of the scenes in which Jesus shows up, as other disciples are mentioned and what they said and what they were thinking about and wondering about. But Peter isn't listed since he went and saw the empty tomb and realized that in his betrayal of Jesus that he had failed, that it was Messiah, and not even under the threat of Roman interrogation the way we would think of Peter, who's so gutsy and get in there and say the thing with all the energy and be brave. But it's not under threat of torture. It's just a ram servant girl who's like, hey, do you know that guy? And he's like, oh, no, I've never heard of him before. He slaps on the fake mustache immediately and is like, I'm definitely not a disciple. And so the pain of that experience, of coming out the other side, spectacularly doing the opposite of what you always said that you would do, because Peter was always arguing with Jesus about no, we'll never let them kill you. And then he definitely, absolutely did. He might not have seen Jesus until this very moment. So it's possible, just maybe, the reason that Peter puts on his coat in order to go planning on swimming, there's no word for swim there in the Greek. It just says that he sucked himself into the sea. And so it's possible, it's my opinion, that perhaps Peter's trying to prove something to Jesus. He's like, no, it's still me. I'm still the guy. I still have all the faith. Look, I'm going to walk on water again, just like the last time I unexpectedly saw you on the Sea of Galilee. You were way out there in the ocean, and I asked you to call to me, and I did walk on water before I fell. I'm going to do that again. That will fix everything. I'm in control of this narrative. I'm in control of showing I'm not that broken, I'm still all in, Jesus. And he puts on his coat and he steps off of the boat in very Monty Python, just face plants straight into the water, which is even more embarrassing when it's in front of all of the disciples and in front of Jesus. And then you're just kind of in there in the water trying to get to shore with your coat on, and everybody's just paddling next to you. Hey, how's it going? So he gets to shore. Everybody sees, everybody's witness to the fact that he doesn't have the faith just to magically walk on water again. What is Jesus going to do? It says, so when they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire laid there and a fish lying on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just now caught. So Shimon Petros got into the boat and hauled the net to the land full of large fish, 153. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. So if we remember, again, other stories with Jesus and fish, he did not even need those 153 fish, right? Last time we saw Jesus and there wasn't enough food for everybody, and it was a fish and some bread, by the way. He multiplied it for everybody. But we see this progression again through Jesus's miracles of sometimes I'll do everything and then you just disperse it, and sometimes I'm going to need you to haul this net onto shore to make enough for everyone. Um, Tilapia is the main fish in the Sea of Galilee is known for. It says that they're a large fish, but taking that aside, a small tilapia is like 3 pounds. And so 153 times 3, you're at like 500 pounds. Shimon, Peter, again, is like, I've got this. Look, I'll do it. It doesn't say all the disciples. It says all the disciples dragged it to the edge of the water, right? But he's just going to get out by himself and push this massive net full of 500 pounds of fish onto the beach. Okay. Peter is again, it seems like he's trying to show, look, I failed. Look, I messed up. Look, I betrayed you. In their culture, it was even bigger than we can wrap our heads around, right? Your rabbi is supposed to be closer to you than your parents. And so to disavow your parents, right? Disavow your rabbi was a huge deal. And he's trying to show, like, no, look, I can still do the work. I still have energy and effort. Look, please, please. So what does Jesus do? He says, come and eat breakfast. And none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Because they knew that it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and he gave it to them, and the fish likewise. So this sounds super awkward, at least to me. This is like beyond the British Office TV show level of awkward. Jesus is still in disguise, but everybody knows that it's him. His like fake mustache is half hanging off, but nobody wants to say anything and be like, we know it's you. But he's still not saying that he's Jesus. And it's so awkward that nobody will even grab a plate from the buffet, from the brunch on the beach that they just made. They're just sitting there. And so Jesus, ever the servant, goes and says, no problem, I'll get you a plate, while his mustache is hanging off. This was now the third time, John 21 says, Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he had been raised from the dead. Now, when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Shimon Petrus, Shimon, son of Yochanan, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Shimon, son of Yochanan, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, shepherd my sheep. He said to him a third time, Shimon, son of Yochanan, do you love me? And Petrus was distressed because he said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you tied your clothes around yourselves and walked wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will tie you up and carry you where you do not want to go. He said this to indicate by what kind of death he would glorify God. And after he said to this, he said to him, follow me. Petrus turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, who also leaned back on his chest at the dinner and said, Lord, who's the one who's betraying you? So when he saw this one, Petrus said to Jesus, Lord, but what about this one? And Jesus said to him, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. So this saying went out to the brothers, that this disciple would not die. But Jesus didn't say that he wouldn't die. But if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? So let's get that weird chunk from the end out of the way. Why are they talking about death? What's going on? The Gospel of John is the last gospel that's written. John is still alive. He's been thriving over in Turkey, where there's a big blend of Gentiles and Jews, and it's going pretty well. By that point, all of the other disciples had been murdered. They had all been martyred. It had not gone well for any one of them. Well, it had. The church exploded and the gospel spread and miracles happened. Lots of great things happened. But they all ended up dead except for John. So John, writing this gospel, is addressing this fact and potentially the fact that Jesus brought it up with them. But the invitation that's still in that little first century squabble for us is that immediately Peter is given his calling, and instead of focusing on, hey, what's my calling, and tell me more about that, he's immediately concerned about somebody else's. right? I know what I'm doing in this world. I know what it means to be a Jesus follower in 2025. I've got the mission. But why is this guy still flourishing? Why is he still remaining? What's going on there? Jesus is like, what is that to you? That's my business. That's not your business. Focus on yourself, right? So there's an invitation in there for us. But back to the classic, quintessential, famous Jesus story. Jesus pardons, forgives Peter, restores Peter 3 times to match the 3 times that he betrayed him during Jesus's trial, right? The rooster crowed 3 times. This is the 3rd appearance of Jesus. There's all these 3s. It comes together. And it's significant that Jesus does make the point to do it 3 times. Why is that important? Why couldn't he just have given him a big hug, right? If we, the modern Christian progressives, wrote the Bible, we would have it go something like, and then Jesus saw Peter and was like, I know that your mistakes don't define you. And he gives him a big hug. And he says, I know that's not who you truly are. We're all good. But again, he meets him where he's at, and he loves him, and he serves him, and he involves him in this miracle. And also, he counts each of those betrayals, each of those mistakes, each of those sins as worthy of working through with Peter, right? It's not just, I'll give you a big hug and put a Band-Aid on it and say, everything's fine, we'll move over it with time. But he brings up 3 times, 3 instances for each mistake, because Jesus cares about our brokenness and cares about the fact that we have these wounds, and wants us to be able to move forward. And he knows that as humans, if we have these things, that just like a big hug feels great in the moment, but it doesn't always fix what happened, right? And so he gives him this opportunity 3 different times and says that you're restored, you're forgiven, you still have a calling 3 different times. But there's more going on in this story other than Jesus not skipping past his brokenness. Just as Jesus doesn't want to skip past our brokenness, we have that temptation like Peter, right? We want to flail in the water and be like, no, look, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I worked on my brokenness by myself, and then I'll show up and everything will be great. And I'll just get a thumbs up from God and not have to talk to him about all of this like turmoil that I've been working on. Jesus says, nope, not actually. But in the Greek, there's so much more to this conversation, because as good Christians raised in Christian households, how many kinds of love are there, you guys? 3. Very good. There's 3 different kinds of love. And of course, it's only 2 of them that show up in this conversation. But it changes the way it comes off incredibly, because Jesus says, Peter, do you agape me? Agape is unconditional, sacrificial, selfless love. And so Jesus says, hey, Peter, you just made this mistake. You just betrayed me. There's this pain that exists in between us. Do you unconditionally, selflessly, sacrificially love me? And Peter's answer is no, because his answer is, Jesus, I phileo you. So that's the word for the brotherly love. So I have deep affection for you. Like I love you like a sibling, and I care about you, and our love is meaningful and deep and important to me, but it's not unconditional and self-sacrificial, which I think he's correct, because unconditional, self-sacrificial, selfless love would not like back into the bushes, Homer Simpson style, during Jesus's trial, right? So this is an accurate portrayal from Peter of where he's at. Maybe I thought I agape'd you, but actually I don't. I just philo you, right? I just brotherly love you. Jesus checks in again. He says, do you agape me? And again, Peter's response is no. I just told you. I philo you. I brotherly love you. And then the 3rd time when Jesus asks, he says, do you even philo me? So, okay, I believe you. You don't unconditionally love me, but do you even like me? You haven't even been there possibly. In Mark, when Mary Magdalene meets Jesus, Jesus tells her to go tell Peter and the disciples. So there's a possibility that Peter has counted himself out of the disciples. He's going his own way. He's going back to being a fisherman. And Jesus says, okay, fine. You don't love me. Do you even like me? Do you even care about me in this sibling, brotherly way? We've been through all of this together. And that's why now Peter is offended. Like, I just told you 3 times I philo you. Why are you doing this to me? This is terrible. And though, so Jesus calls him out on that. He asks him, is this even true? And it's hard and it's a difficult conversation. So they're on this walk on the beach. But each time he says, no, I philo you, Jesus still gives him his calling. He still gives him an instruction. He still tells him that he has a job. He has a role. He doesn't say, well, you don't agape me after I've agaped you. I died for you that you might live. And now you can't even say that back when I'm still here face to face. I haven't even left yet. He doesn't say, well, go work through this like repentance workshop, take these worksheets, like you need to do the work, go to therapy, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't say any of that. He just says, you still have a calling. Feed my sheep, shepherd my flock, right? And so there's this truth for us in the midst of our sense of belief and sense of doubt and trying to figure out where exactly am I in my followership of Jesus? Who am I? Where am I at? Right? That for so many of us is a shifting compass of like, oh, I think I'm over here. Well, I don't know about that. Well, this just happened in the news and that makes me not want to feel like this. And it goes back and forth. In the midst of all of that vacillating and trying to figure out who we are and what we actually believe in the world, Jesus still has work for us to do. He still has a calling for us. We still have purpose to walk out on the planet. And that's not the end of Peter's story, right? Because the thing that Jesus tells him at the end of reaffirming his calling 3 times, even though he's only in the place of philo, is he says, follow me. So it's not the end of Jesus's discipleship of Peter, even though Jesus is going to ascend back into heaven and do his Jesus stuff, and Peter will be more on his own, though he has the Spirit. He will continue to have this relationship with Jesus in the way that all of us have relationships today, which is of a spiritual nature rather than a physical nature, which is so much harder to pin down. But there's still growth that can happen for Peter if he continues to follow him, even while he's in this still kind of painful spot of philo instead of agape. And that's probably why he tries to pivot to somebody else, right? When we encounter that difficulty within ourselves of, I'm not where I wish that I was, and now I'm being called out on it. It's so much easier for us to, at that moment, pivot to somebody else and be like, well, what about this guy? Surely, blah, blah, blah. And Jesus redirects him and says, nope, we're talking about you right now. So what are our takeaways? You are here, Huckabees, so I can name drop you again. What are our takeaways? Number 1, if the disciples hadn't tried the other side of the boat, they wouldn't have gotten the fish. So if we don't say yes to trying out the miracle, to showing up where we think there's just a hint of a possibility God might be, the miracle doesn't get done. God doesn't choose to show up just for the sake of his own glory if we are not going to listen to his invitation to do so. Often, not always. Number 2, when Jesus shows up, we have to be willing to talk about our brokenness and the things we've done wrong. So Jesus meets us where we're at always with love and compassion and empathy and service, right? He serves them all breakfast very much like last time they were together. He washed their feet. And yet, he still calls them forward into the hard conversation. So in our walk with Jesus, we have to say yes to going through that brokenness with him and not trying to solve it all and then perform properly so we can go back to a different time in our walk with Jesus. We can walk on water, it'll be just fine because God is good and loving and graceful. That means he wants to talk about those things with us and walk through them with us and not just have us say, well, I know God is good and loving and graceful, so I don't really have to talk to him about it. I'm good, actually. Nope. Number 3, even when we're not walking on water, even when we're not feeling like, yes, Jesus, I'm all in, God still has work for us to do. So maybe we are like Peter, we're the sheepdogs of the chief shepherd, That didn't come out of my mouth, right? Consonants. Consonants are hard. Chief shepherd. I got it. Maybe we're like the other disciples who go and they build flourishing new Christian communities in places that are for outsiders and completely unknown, right? Thomas goes to India, we talked about last week, and founds 7 church communities, just like the 7 hills of Rome. Maybe our work is like James, working with the powerful insiders and reminding them that what they do matters. But if we're willing to do the work of hauling that fish onto the shore, right? Peter was still saying, hey, I'm still in. I'll put the effort in. I might not be loving you and feeling the way that I wish that I felt, but I'm still willing to show up. That's all God needs. That's all Jesus needs from us, is the willingness to show up and be willing to drag the 500-pound fish net out of the ocean. If we're willing to do that, he still has a calling for us along the way, and he'll meet us in that place in our discipleship experience with him. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to talk about some things around that. What are the things that get in the way of being able to do what we would like to do? We have a song about God meeting us where we're at and growing us out of that place. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll do a song. God, I thank you that you are not into the easy fixes that feel good for 30 seconds and then plummet to the ground in another 3 days. You are about the places of our brokenness and meeting us in them for real healing to happen, for real wholeness to happen. You are not scared of our brokenness. You're not afraid of the places where we don't love you. You want to talk to us about those places and meet us in that and give us a calling and move us forward. And I thank you for that. I thank you for your expansiveness, your love, which is willing to stretch over those gaps and meet us wherever we are. I pray that that would be real for us, not just something we say and put on t-shirts, but that something that we would experience day after day after day of you reaching out and us saying yes. So I pray that we would experience that in the song, in this conversation together, that you would be in the midst of all of it. In your name, Jesus, amen.